Thank you all for attending. This is going to be a really interesting discussion today because we're talking about the state of software and SaaS, and we're going to be talking a lot about sort of the threats, but also the opportunities within software, how things are changing. And I was thinking about this a couple days ago, that I think that in no time in the last 15 years have things really been changing as fast as they've been changing and in so many directions as it has in the last 3 years, I would say. So it's a really interesting time, and I think that there's going to be some spirited discussion here by our panelists who all come from really different backgrounds and have different perspectives on things. So what we're going to do is we're going to start over here with Olaf. Olaf Kjær from O&O. Would you mind doing a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Olaf, and I'm co-founder and managing director of O&O Software. We're a Berlin-based software company, started out back in '97, so we're more or less a dinosaur in this space. And we started actually with a B2B software for Windows NT, and when Microsoft decided to unify the platforms, well, we came to the B2C market, actually. And that's where we are right now.
Great, thank you, Olaf. Next up, we have Stefan Utzinger from Novastore.
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Novastore. Novastore is a Hamburg, LA-based backup and recovery software company. We're in the market for well over 10 years. We have started with Cleverbridge in 2009. This was basically our step into the SMB software distribution business. Before we were more on the pure enterprise B2B business.
Great, thank you, Stefan. Over here we have David Walsh from Uniblue.
Hi everyone, my name is David Walsh, I'm the CMO at Uniblue. I've been with the utility company that most of you know since last January. And previous to that I was with McAfee, based out of Luxembourg, running their worldwide direct sales business. And then previous to that I was head of marketing at PayPal in the UK and eBay before that. So my software experience is the last 5 to 6 years. And really much more the marketing and the sales side as much as anything.
Great, thank you, David. And last but not least, Christian Blume.
Yeah, hi, my name is Christian Blume. I'm the CEO of Cleverbridge. For those of you that didn't know, I'm actually a trained car mechanic, so that's where I started off from.
Weren't very successful at that, were you?
Exactly. I have been working in this industry since 2000 actually. So I've got a 12-year background, especially in the area of product management and business development, and have been around the block a couple of times when it comes down to software. So I have a little bit of experience selling internationally.
Great, thanks, Christian. So what I'm going to do first is set the baseline of what we're going to be talking about. And as we go through this, we'll talk about different issues or different topics. And what I'll do in each case is I'll take and spend a few minutes just giving you some general background information about it, and then going to the panelists to start the discussion. So what I want to show here, this is some data that was provided by Forrester in a research report a few years ago. And what it shows is the market size of the global software market. So keep in mind that this includes kind of everything. It includes, enterprise software. It includes, operating system software. So there's a lot of stuff in here. But what I really wanted to point out is that in the center there, you see 476. That's $476 billion of software sold globally. And this was a projection for 2013 as of a few years ago. On the left-hand side, that is application software. So it would include, I would argue, almost everything that people are selling from this room, the companies that are represented here. And on the right-hand side, that's middleware and other parts. So on that left-hand side, application software was half, actually slightly greater than half of the total number, and SaaS was 1/5 of that number. So as of a few years ago, the projections were that $476 billion software market. Of that, half of it was the kind of software that you generally sell, as well as a small percentage of that being SaaS. So I want those numbers in there because we'll come back to them a little bit as we go forward. So issue number one, post-PC does not equal no PC. There's been a lot of discussion about this, a lot of commentary that you've probably seen in the industry news about what is post-PC. Is this pure tablets? Is it something different? Does this mean the end of PCs? Really, that sort of seems to be what people are saying out there. And I saw this really interesting research report from IDC. And I don't want to dig into it too much, but what you can see here, these are projections by IDC of what the PC and tablet sales will be going forward. And they've done these every year, basically every quarter. So you'll see that they've kind of revised them in different areas here. And what I really want to point out is, right, so I'm just going to step over here. What I really want to point out is that over here, you can see 2010. This is essentially the total PC market, basically pre-tablet. This gold part is the tablet part, and it's a very small amount, maybe 20 million. And they were basically saying everything below was 350 million. And down here is the legend that shows that there's mature companies, and then there's emerging markets. So 350 million PCs and tablets sold in 2010. And as you move to the right, you see that the actual number of PC and tablet market, the amount, has increased pretty dramatically. And what they're doing is they're basically showing that, the influence of the tablet in this whole market. But what I think is really interesting to look at is if you look at 2016, for example, you'll notice that the far right part of 2016, which is right over here, that they're showing, I think that's about 250 million tablets. But if you look at the rest of it, the red, the green, the blue, and then the dark blue at the bottom, that's actually slightly increasing. It's about 380 million compared to the 350 million from 2010. So there's a lot of discussion about, what's happening with this market. Is it going away in some way? And if you consider just the computers that are being sold as some indicator of it, you would see that it looks like computers being sold is actually still slightly increasing, but there's also this huge tablet market that's being added on top. So a few other pieces of data. 2012, we saw, tablets. Microsoft probably didn't have too much to do with this. Amazon had something, but Apple did quite a bit and had 128 million units in total sold. So that equates to about 10% of the global smart connected devices. And we'll touch on that a little later too. 30% of Generation Y uses a tablet rather than a PC or a laptop. And SaaS accounted for 4.1% in 2012. That's a different study. So the question that I want to pose to the panel is download software dead, right? Is it essentially going away? Because I think that's kind of the elephant in the room that people maybe don't want to talk about. So I think we'll start with Olaf on this one.
Well, this download software dead, reminds me of a quotation from Mark Twain, who said, the reports of my death are an exaggeration. I think the download market will maybe decrease. It's not dead. And I think that the interest for the people will simply shift from a PC. If you consider someone had a PC and a notebook, and now he also has a smartphone and a tablet. So just to do some maths, he only has half of the time for the PC and the notebook left, because the other time he plays around with smartphone and tablet. Mm-hmm. And so personally, I think, and the other thing is actually, how could you get software on your PC or on your system, as long as you don't beam it there. So you have to download something. Mm-hmm. But download becomes different. So we realize download maybe as an app store, so that download is seamless. Yeah, you don't want to be asked where you put your files, C program files, what. So. Mm-hmm. I think that will die, but software itself as a download will be there, especially for businesses. Mm-hmm. Maybe B2C is a different story.
Mm-hmm. David, you're on the B2C side. How do you see it? Are you seeing any? What's your opinion of?
I wouldn't say dead, but I'd say we're probably in intensive care, and I would say that speaking to people here today, other people that I know in the industry, there is a lot of concern. And I wasn't that concerned last year when I entered UniBlue, because I still looked at the PC shipments. I felt very comfortable. I still like the fact that there's 1.4 billion PCs in usage today. But when you look at the facts, they're starting to really change. Last year, the decline was only 3% year over year. in PC shipments. In Q1, I don't know if you saw the latest data, but that's accelerated to a decline of 17%. So I think that the moment probably has just happened where the shift from PC, and I agree that it's never an or, it's an and. I think people are PC and other devices, but I think the time that they've got, I think the age bracket of those that are out there buying things, I think the fact that the traditional PC owner is in their 40s or 50s, if you look at the demographics, they're an aging population, they buy less anyway, and I think the word software, probably a little bit misleading now, in that most people don't consider an app a piece of software. They are buying apps, and it's a very different behavior. And pricing. I think the biggest one for me as well is pricing. When you look at software, yes, people are downloading, but they're not prepared to pay what they did. So even if you maintained market share, even if you maintain the number of downloads, the pressure on price is so substantial, and getting to those customers in the first place is so much more expensive. I'm definitely visiting software in intensive care from a download perspective.
Stefan, how would you see it in your market? You sell also through OEMs and into B2B. How do you see things in your market?
Maybe I like to start from a total different side of thinking. We have learned that the number of tablets increase, the number of devices increase, and this means this trend to the second and third device cuts into the personal budget either of a company or the private household. And every company I'm talking with says, oh, we like to grow this percentage. In any case, everybody likes to grow faster than the GDP. So the question is, what is shrinking? So what I'm seeing today is that the download software market will change, but we will see another software layer on top of this where we basically can cut off complexity of the software delivery market, bringing more value to the customers. And this is something, what I'm seeing is a total SaaS-based software layer, which can basically increase the value we as software vendors brings to our customers.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it true that true SaaS isn't download? So I think that's the other elephant in the room that I hear so often, and I heard it today. What is SaaS? And I would definitely like, I know it's in the future questions, that we get to a definition of what we mean by that, because if you're talking about true SaaS, then yes, that's a growth market. I think that's where everything's going to sit. If you're talking about download, true download, where there isn't really a SaaS element to it, or only a partial element, then I do think that that's a dying market. So I'd definitely like to ask that to the panel as we go through as well.
Christian, what's your opinion? Cleverbridge sees a broader picture of different types of companies, some who have been disrupted by SaaS, some that maybe haven't felt that effect yet. What's your opinion of, is software download dead?
I definitely think that the market is changing, and we're going to see an evolution of where software is not going to play that much of an important role, and I think especially the price point is a huge challenge. And from that perspective, I think that the party is over. Having those 75, 85, 90% margins, that you can keep for yourself by producing a software product at a level, of a price point of a B2C product at around about $50. I think that's very, very challenging to maintain. I think there will still be software products that are going to survive and that are going to be important piece of a multi-approach to how devices are being used. And I think that there are products that are definitely going to disappear because SaaS is going to take over. But I think there's other products that are going to be maintained as a perpetual license model because it's just needed. And it's just a question of how that is going to evolve. And I think right now we're all kind of poking in the dark with a stick and trying to understand where the market is trending towards. But it's far too early to make any assumption right now of whether the download software is dead. I mean, we just have to have a major downturn, of Amazon services, where there's a breach or there's a leakage or something like that. And then everybody is going to say, I need to have my perpetual license back again. It's just a question of how the market is going to evolve over time.
Mm-hmm. Olaf, would you agree generally with what you've heard?
I would pick up with Christian, yeah, especially if the service goes down. The question is actually who owns the data. Yeah, so SaaS is a very interesting question. Who owns the data? Yeah, let me think of a Kindle book. So you can't pass it on to someone else, which you can do with a real book. So and Amazon can shut down the service, and then you've lost your book. So it's actually you rent something, you don't own it anymore. So download software for me is really something to own, and SaaS is something to rent. Yeah, so it's different. Of course, the pricing will be different for this because, as we know from houses, also if we rent a house, it's cheaper than buying a house. So I think the market is changing, and so what SaaS is really. So there we have a lot of questions to be answered, like infrastructure. Yeah, so what we can. So recently, Deutsche Telekom announced they will limit the bandwidth because so many heavy downloaders seeing television over their network, so they will make it or maybe add a premium on that for people who download a lot. So what will it be? And do you have all your mobile devices always connected? So where you are, it's becoming more and more, and it's a thing. Well, I think it will perpetual licenses download software will be still there all over the next years. Yeah, so maybe not for eternity, but maybe for the next years. But it's shrinking, maybe, yeah. And SaaS services like Evernote or Office 365 will evolve, and they will take place. And also, it costs money and will bring down the prices.
I'd like to ask David, and I'll go to Stefan and Olaf after this. But do you see your business directly tied to the number of PCs or to the number of connected devices in a way?
So, I mean, where we are today with the products we've got, I'm tied to PC. But there's absolutely no doubt my mind is on devices. And if you look at the fact that by 2022, you're going to have an average of 50 connected devices in a household with 2 teenage boys or girls, that's where you've got to go. And I think for me, it's not an do I do this or do that. I think we've got to do an and both. And I love the point on ownership. I think consumers have completely changed their view on ownership in that 5-6 years ago, they wanted to own the product. They wanted to have a physical CD on their shelf in their computer room. Without that, they didn't feel they were getting something. And I saw that at McAfee particularly. Today, people have really started to understand, particularly Generation Y, that it's access and it is true software as a service or anything as a service. Content, music, film. I don't want to own anything but a subscription to access that. I don't want to own a film. I want to be able to pick another one tomorrow. So there's questions of ownership, privacy, the data that you're giving these people. But for me, ownership has really changed, I think, over just the last 2 or 3 years. And people are now very used to paying per use, per month, rather than an annual subscription or buying the product and owning.
Stefan, a couple interesting points out of there I'm going to bring up, but would you also say that your business is directly tied to the number of PCs, or is it independent from that?
Not directly connected to the number of PCs. I mean, we are in the backup and recovery business, and our message is basically if somebody uses our software, small business, large business, yeah, we can bring your business or recover your business or your data, yeah, basically within a very short time frame. So for us, the number of tablets as of today is not as important as the number of PC servers and virtual machines. So the challenge on our side, and I think the challenge of a lot of companies who are dealing in our area or more on the whole virtualization, cloud space, and what Olaf already said is more and more people also in business are using applications who are sitting in the cloud, so the whole data is in the cloud. So the question is for us more backing up the cloud, have a local agent and basically make sure if the internet goes down or whatever happens, that they can basically still recover the data locally.
Olaf, same question to you. Would you say that your business is directly tied to the number of PCs, or is it more than that?
It is. Yeah, it is.
It is what?
It is tied.
Okay.
Okay. So because, well, Of course, well, as we provide tools for Windows, so we not only rely on PCs, but on Windows PCs. So if Microsoft screws up, we are with them. And hopefully they don't do it. But the thing is that if you look at the PC market, I think, talking about, decreasing numbers, I read also these articles, IDG and Gartner published them, and all were in a sort of panic. But you have to keep in mind there are 1.6 billion PCs out there, so the market is quite saturated. So if you already have a PC, buying a new PC, you have to have a real reason for that. Replacing the PC, I think that the life cycle of PCs prolongs. So replacing the PC does not play such a big role because most of the people, I think, are now defining, for example, the performance of their PC with the download speed of the internet connection, not of the PC itself, which CPU is in there. Yeah? I remember times where the Pentium was introduced by Intel and all said, wow, we're in a new age. And today it's actually doesn't play any role which processor you have inside your PC. And maybe that's the thing that we have to see. Well, the economy is changing. Maybe the software market is getting more ripe, like the automobile industry. They have the same problem with car sharing right now. So car sharing is becoming more and more popular for younger people. And so for us, I think we have to challenge our business model. We have to think about that and see what's going on.
Okay. Christian, would you agree with what you've been hearing? It sounds like we have a little bit of a different opinion, but in general, I think it's the same direction.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I totally agree with Olaf there. I think, when you take a look at the PC market and how long people are holding on to their PC, I think that right now they're substituting, they're not substituting, they're complementing their PC by a tablet, a smartphone or whatever, and which to me, judging from using those types of devices in a productivity environment, I have to admit that neither a tablet nor a smartphone actually gives me any kind of access to something where I can work on a productivity level. But it's a very good convenience factor that I have when I'm watching TV and I want to look up something or I want to go quickly surf or check my emails. When I type an email on a tablet PC, I don't know what it's like with you guys, but it takes me around about 5 times typing the same email because I have so many typos in it and I always have to go back. It's not really something that's productive for me. So I'm totally with Olaf on what he said there, and I think that people are actually going to hold on much longer to their PCs, and that in turn is going to result in that they're going to need additional software products, which are going to keep their products, their PCs at a level which is acceptable to them.
Great. I want to ask if there are any questions on this. We've talked for about 15 minutes here, so any questions for the panelists before we move on to the next question? Or we have one back here.
I'd love to know how you are integrating the mobile apps and device apps with your desktop programs. What is the monetization strategy?
So do you have any mobile apps with your current products? Are you evolving them towards mobile yet? Or is there a reason to, based on, Olaf, in your case, it's tied to Windows, so.
Yeah, it's tied to Windows, so it's pretty, it's not so easy to move it to an Android or iOS. But actually, we develop mobile apps, in sister companies. And what we see is there's a great demand for the apps, yeah, and you can do it for free and let them download. But creating revenue, so it's pretty hard. So personally, I think that the app dream or whatever, is so that people are moving towards the app stores, is not so easy. Because integration, maybe there's some sort of integration. If you have business applications like Microsoft has, yeah, you can integrate a mobile interface, of course, on your device, and that makes sense. For us personally, it doesn't make sense to do this thing on your mobile.
Actually, we'll cover that in our next next issue here. So if we can hold on to the mobile question because we get into the app part of it. Any other questions for the panel right now on this topic? And there we have issue number 2, the app dream. I guess what I'd like to ask people is everybody put up their hand if they have a smartphone, and a smartphone being defined as something that's not just, punching in some numbers. BlackBerry and on to up, let's call it. So a lot of people, pretty much everybody. How many people, keep your arms up, how many people have downloaded an app for their phone before? So most of the people. How many people have paid for an app before? Keep your hand up. And how many people have paid for an app over $5 or €5? So it's down to about 25% of the people, and I bet we could get that down to 0 pretty quickly. So there's always an app for that, at least that's what we're told, right? Mobile apps generated $30 billion in revenue last year. So thinking back to what I talked about before, $450 billion market, and apps generated $30 billion in revenue. $17 billion is being spent on the enterprise market to develop and deploy new apps. I know that Stefan will talk about this a little bit. And we saw with a very recent story, a 17-year-old that sold a company that was an app company for $30 million. So on the surface, it seems like, hey, everybody can make money on apps. But I guess the question is it a legitimate source of revenue? And to piggyback on Lori's question, go to you, David. How is your business changing? Are you planning to do an app in some way? And do you think it's a legitimate revenue source?
So I think the first thing is I don't see it being a direct expansion of the products that we have today. I think we're going to have to reconsider what we look at in this utility space if we're going to go into apps. We've actually hired at UniBlue a new CEO recently who is very technology background. I think that the traditional CEO who sits there, no offense, sits there and isn't from a technology background, I just don't think it's going to work in the modern world anymore, not in a software company. So we've gone out and hired the best. He's come over from the Silicon Valley, and we're now looking at, do we build, buy, or partner? And if we do that, where are we going to put the bets? And this is what everyone's concerned about. Where do you put the money? There are 1 million apps on the App Store today. You can probably find how many of those easily? 200, 300? The other 998,000, you don't get there very easily. And if Apple don't like you, you won't even make it into that App Store. So these walled gardens, the way that they're being decided on what their content is, who accesses those, is a very concerning trend for me. I do think there's an app play. There has to be. We have to be there. Can you monetize? It's the pricing issue. It costs exactly the same money to develop an app that does good things as it does a fully fledged piece of software that goes on the desktop that I used to be able to charge £50 for. I've seen some great apps from companies like Symantec that are doing very cool things for the mobile, and yet they're at $5.99, and the comments from people isn't about the quality of the product, it's about the price. So we've got huge price sensitivity. People, and we created part of the problem, the freemium model, where we gave a lot for free and then we upsold you or in-app, as everybody's doing today. So for me, I don't know where you're going to place your bets as a company. You have to be there, but I think you're going to have to think very carefully about how much you invest, how are you going to create the routes to market, how are you going to get this product out there and distribute it in a way that's meaningful. How's it going to work when 30% of that app, the price of that app goes straight to Apple? That isn't what we're used to. We're used to paying very small margins to other people, and we take the bulk for ourselves. And we're just not set up for the app world, in my view, today. But do we need to be there? Yes. Are we going to develop something? Absolutely. I think we'll probably go out and honestly probably buy somebody because it needs to get us there quicker. And how are we going to manage the routes to market, which today we control so well, the affiliate, search, etc. That's going to be a challenge, I think, for me. And can we come together as software companies and think about ways that we can build our own little walled gardens, or are there ways that we can circumnavigate the app stores? I don't know the answer to all of those, but I think as an industry, we definitely need to start those conversations. I hate monopolies. I hate closed down routes to market, and that's exactly what you're getting. You've got Google who own 84% of the search market. They've got Android, which is on the majority of devices that are shipped today. That's a very worrying situation, that the route to market is owned by one company, The operating system and the software you buy is owned by one company. If anybody else was doing that, they'd be up in front of the European Court of whatever on competition issues. And when Microsoft did it to not even that level, we certainly found that there were issues for them. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at and honestly discussed openly, but we should be starting to challenge that as a software companies, in partnership with other people, and starting to see if there are other ways that we can change the ecosystems that are developing. A little bit of a rant. But this keeps me awake at night, and genuinely, because I've got 100 people back in Malta whose salaries and earnings and their home life depend on me getting this right. So it bothers me, and the speed at which it's changing is faster than any time we've ever seen anything. I mean, this is really the Industrial Revolution 2.0, not Web 2.0. And if you look at what happened in the Industrial Revolution, actually there's a lot of similarities to what's happening with data and technology today. It's the equivalent of us moving from the countryside to the town, and really the growth of a lot of what we're talking about today, software as a service, will come into its own when internet and Wi-Fi connections are ubiquitous, and they're coming. And look at the 4G speed. The speed of 4G is substantially better. Well, once the customer doesn't notice a difference between a download, an app, or a piece of software, it feels the same. Once it feels the same, they don't care where it's hosted, they don't care where it is, but they certainly care what they pay for it.
Okay, well, we're done today. We'll run out of time. No.
Sorry.
Thank you, David. That was, I think, some great insight there and opinion. Christian, you're at Cleverbridge. We're more on the B2C side at this moment, seeing a lot of that. How would you see things? Because I think that David's seeing it very much from a B2C perspective right now.
Well, I mean, David just got rid of my job. That's the first thing that I took out of this. No. I share a lot of the thoughts that David mentioned here, but at the same time, I think that we're quite a step away from all of this happening in such a fashion. I think what has to be understood by the user is that the product is not what they are actually buying into in an app store, but that they are actually the product. Because all of the information that is being collected through those apps is actually the true value, and that's why the information that is collected is so valuable, and that's why those products can be so cheap out there. And I think it is a realization phase that we're also going to be entering into, where people are going to realize, hey, listen, I have to let down my underpants here. They're like X-raying me all the way. And we're going to see people actually saying, you know what, I don't want to be part of this game anymore. I'm willing to pay for something that is going to offer me quality in a way where I am not going to be part of being stripped down to my underwear.
Do you think they're going to see it? Do you
I think they will,
consumers,
yes.
What's going to be the trigger?
I think the trigger is going to be when you have a lot more of those informations leaking as to what those apps are actually collecting from you. I mean, right now, everybody in this room, I would like to see a hand up here. Who's using WhatsApp in this room? Right? I mean, WhatsApp is basically collecting all of your data on your Android, iOS devices, whatever. Everything that you have on there, basically WhatsApp has access to it. But nobody thinks about it truly. It's something, where everybody feels, oh, this is such a cool feature and everything. It's for free, I can send out messages and everything. But truly, I am very concerned about it. I mean, I'm an old guy, from an internet perspective. I might be a bit different when it comes down to data privacy and everything, but I am concerned about something like that. And I see, that there's also a change in how people are interacting with these devices, because they're realizing more and more that there's information being transferred to somewhere, where I don't even know what they're going to do with it. And and statistically speaking, this is totally wrong. I am willing to pay for it, that my information is secured, whatever way it is. If I have the opportunity, yes, I'm willing to spend $10, $15, $20, make it even $50. I don't have an issue with it.
Let's come over to this side of the room. Stefan, you're more into the B2B side of things. How do you see this question? Because we talked a little bit about this, and you have some interesting ideas and thoughts.
Yeah. So maybe start with a little story. In 2007, the European side of Novastore bought the American side of of Novastore, and they were more on the SMB business, a business I've never really been into, and they had their own developed store to sell products online. And then we brought the companies together, and I got every day an email, every day something, here's wrong, and we have to invest more here and there and whatever. And then I said, hey, come on, I don't have the time to basically fight with these emails and tax problems and other things, so there must be something different around. Then I remembered somebody who has founded Element 5, so I basically called him up and asked, hey, can you give me some ideas? And he said, hey, go to Cleverbridge. I've never heard of this company. Then I basically went to Berlin, and I met a lot of people talking about number of downloads, affiliates, whatever, all words I've never heard. But then I basically said, okay, this must be the right thing. And I started the negotiation, the contract with Christina. And the only thing I know is what I'm paying today. That's the only thing, what I'm paying today and what is my problem. So I know that I was willing to pay exactly this amount of money. Then we agreed on a percentage, which was a pretty good deal for me, because I could basically close the whole development team of my own store. And if I'm looking at the B2B area right now, when I'm talking to my customers today, they were always technology-driven in the storage business. And now a new generation of people come in, people who have grown up with the internet, people who are used to working with apps, and they don't want to fight with their internal departments. They don't want to fight with other things. So, and they are ready to pay if we can deliver them apps where it makes their life easier. I give you a little example. As of today, we have a number of customers who buying site licenses from us. And site licenses means, let's say, if you buy one product from us, which is maybe 50, if you buy 10 products of us, instead of 50 or 500, it's maybe 400. If you buy 1,000 products, we say, you know what? Per single instance, you have to pay 150, because that's the enterprise site license. But you get a perfect service and everything else. But then they start rolling out these site licenses. And very often they send us per fax or emails asking for key codes or whatever. If we can automate this via an app, people have it on the phone, and if they install it, they just click on it and say, I want to have one new key code out of the budget my purchase department has already bought. My customer saves money, and we save money. And the savings we can share, which means I can charge for the app. And this is how we are really thinking, and how we have started developing kind of apps, more, let's say, a kind of cloud-based or web-based platforms. And we brought the first on a little bit different marketing angle to the market, and people sell it on we sell it on Cleverbridge for $2.99, and it's a good seller. So we see that people are paying for apps. If you just have the approach, just don't compete with the free market.
But in your scenario, what you're really doing is you're creating partner enablement tools to help your partners be more efficient. So in that case, I think it's a reasonable expectation that someone would pay a decent amount of money for that, because you're saving them so much money along the way.
Yes.
So Olaf, how about you? What would you say from your business perspective?
From a business perspective, I would say apps are not, from my perspective, not a revenue source, but apps can be definitely a source of money. Mm-hmm. So like the 17-year-old Nick who sold the company, Yeah, so I think there are many apps around, and WhatsApp is maybe one of them, where the founders think we have a cool app, we make it for free, we collect all the data, we get the eyeballs, and then we sell it to someone, and to a big one-off. So, and that's actually where the money comes. And there you will see also the VCs coming in, backing up these companies. But for us as as an ISV, we develop software. Well, on a different business model, we develop software and we want money for that. Yeah, having only eyeballs, well, it might be okay, but it's not our approach. And if you manage to have 1 million downloads a month and 100,000 convert to a paid version, I would say, well, yeah, that could feed a company. But most of the apps, I think, are one-man shows. And if you have a good app, someone copies it and it makes it for a free version and hopes to sell it to someone else off. I think the business model is, from my perspective, pretty restricted.
Mm-hmm. I heard, I was talking to somebody, I think, yesterday about this, and David, I'll take this question to you, and they were saying that, that apps really are a great vehicle to get business into a SaaS product, for example. What's your thought on that?
I think on one point that I heard earlier as well, I'd like to pick up, before I go to that, if you don't mind. I think with the apps thing, the barriers to entry were very low. So pretty much a guy in the garage creates an app, put it through the store, let's try and make some money. When the realities of life hit this person, which is that there needs to be updates, that there's customer support issues if you're selling something, that there needs to be a whole infrastructure behind that business. I think we may, and this is certainly one of my, hope's never an option, it's not a strategy, but I definitely feel there'll be some shakeout over the next couple of years. And you will see probably fewer apps than we've got today in some areas, in some verticals. I think you will see the price creep up. I think it's going to have to come up, particularly when people start to realize that they've got to put this whole infrastructure behind things. In terms of apps being an access for SaaS, honestly, I'm not sure what my view is on that. I definitely think that there's a marketing play with apps. I think that I'd want to be on those devices, even if I'm not selling a product, that hopefully there is then a way that I can communicate, sell to that person, and sell them something that will work on their desktop or their laptop. So I think that I think of it as, it's not my job to know where the customer's going to go. If I'm going to guess that, I'm going to get it wrong. My job is to be everywhere they go. And when they choose to buy, make sure that I'm there too, and that I can fulfill in whatever way I need to. And I think that's why the app needs to be there for me. I don't think it's going to be a revenue source. I definitely think it's going to be access to us as a company. There'll be something that we offer. Marketing, it's certainly there for. We'll probably sell to them slightly differently, or it's capture their email address or something that we can then cross-sell, upsell to.
Great. Want to open it up for any questions that people have on this topic before we move on to the next one? Great. So SaaS strategy, we've seen a lot of companies in the last few years that are really doing more in the cloud side. These are just some examples of companies that either are pure play companies like Zendesk, YouSendIt, who came along and disrupted a business, or you've got Adobe Creative Cloud where they're trying to disrupt themselves, create that new product that is in the cloud and fulfills their customers' needs. So, is SaaS, or SaaS appears to not be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think we've discussed that a little bit. License-based or on-premise software is still dominant delivery method today. I think I would definitely agree with that. I hope everybody else would. But as we've seen and discussed already a little bit, there's a variety of end-user concerns, privacy being a big one, security and support coming along with that. So, what are the current trends that people are seeing in SaaS and or cloud computing? And I'm sure that if I go to David here, he's going to bring up the question of what is the definition of SaaS and cloud computing. But
yeah, I've heard about 5 different definitions today, and one of them that keeps coming up is it's the way that you pay for the product. So yeah, what's your definition?
I don't know. What about you, Olaf? How would you define cloud computing, or let's call it SaaS? Let's stick with the word SaaS and move from there.
I think, for me personally, I think that the future or the trends are web applications, actually. So apps like we know them today in an app store are just an intermediate product. So simply because I think that's from a customer perspective and from a developer perspective, web applications make the most sense. They're independent on the platform. You're not locked up in an app store, a Google Play. Yeah, so even the name is saying what's the most apps are downloaded there. And so personally, I think that web applications can give us a great push towards maybe replacing certain desktop applications like Office does. And also for us as a tools provider, we can maybe discover and explore new opportunities which we hadn't had before. For example, just a simple example, when we produce a new version, we have to maintain the older version. And over the years, you have a lot of versions running around, and you have a lot of customer support calls, which are for the old versions. And so you have to keep track on them, and you have to support them. And with a web-based application, you just switch to the new version. And you even have the luxury to take features away, and the customers become happy. Yeah, so if you have if you try to bring out a new version with less features and say you want to charge for them, I think it's pretty hard to argue for that with the customers.
Mm-hmm. Stefan, you talked a little bit about how your business is actually maybe is profiting from the fact that download software is decreasing because more stuff is moving to the cloud and you're basically there backing up the cloud. What's your perspective on this? What kinds of trends are you seeing? Is that a big one? Are you seeing a major growth in that area?
Definitely. What we see more and more is that more also business critical application like CRM or also vertical applications are more moving into the cloud. We have even more critical verticals like healthcare, where they sometimes using some SaaS-based applications which are sitting in the cloud, where basically doctors researching for some things and also ordering some things. But then for us, the challenge is to backing up this data. On the one side, so basically backing up the cloud, but also using the cloud as a kind of a storage device, even sometimes only as a temporary storage device. So this is where I'm thinking is for us a little bit more, because now we have more and more applications out there. The development cycles become shorter, and the SaaS-based applications don't inform us as a software vendor when they bring out a new release, because they have constantly new releases. So you'd basically have to pick up how to back up these data if you promise your customers that they will have the security and the luxury that they have that data either online and offline available. Mm-hmm. So this is the trend we are seeing, that for the software vendors, if they are in the more B2B space as we are, have to look into how people developing SaaS software and how they also can inform their customer and update their software to go in line with the SaaS applications.
Mm-hmm. Christian, what kind of trends are you seeing? What's your experience based on again, seeing a very broad view of these companies that have been doing download software, as well as seeing some of these organic, the you send it type came out of nowhere, so to say. They developed it from without having a business in it previously.
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I am seeing is that there's a lot of the freemium models are kind of originating from those companies that truly want to upsell something at a later stage. And I think there's a lot of stuff happening that is really helpful for this industry, because there's value that can be created here by upselling those products. I think that, and this was something that I mentioned earlier, I think you can see that still right now a lot of those products that are being sold as SaaS, are utilizing a lot of the information that you have residing on your own infrastructure, whether this be apps or whatever it is. And I think that this trend is going to continue. I think that we are, there's so many different opportunities, and I think that Stefan Utzinger mentioned a couple of them. It depends on what angle you're looking at it. You've got the health care situation, where a lot of the SaaS information is so hugely valuable and at the same time is so hugely dangerous, considering the fact where the data is going and you don't know who's accessing it. I think that the SaaS in general, you know, we're still at the infancy level, and people are still very concerned about where things are going. And I think that if we really create a certain value out there, you know, that people are seeing that there is true value to whatever is up in the cloud for them, I think that there's a huge way of monetizing it. And there's a lot of small plays right now out there that are trying to monetize whatever there's a few big ones, the Dropboxes, the Boxes, the You Send It, you know, that are probably generating quite a lot of revenue out there. But I think we're going to see a lot more companies moving their business into the cloud as long as it's possible.
David, you want to comment on this now that we've got the definition of SaaS out there?
Definitely agree with everything I've heard, and I think the key word that Christian said is value. I think it's irrelevant what platform, what operating system, or how you sell. If your product offer value to the customer, you will, to some degree, be successful. And I think that there's been too many situations, and you know, I'll even take a hit on this myself from UniBlue, where we haven't always offered enough value to the customer that's clearly demonstrated to them, that when it comes to renewal is clearly reminded to them, and that we should encourage their usage. We want them to use the product. I agree with the versionless part of SaaS as well, which I think is absolutely the way things will go. The consumer's almost there. I remember at McAfee, if you didn't put a different year on it, people didn't buy it. Even though underneath the hood, you got the latest version. So we made a huge error. I think we lost about $40 million taking the year off, and we quickly put it back. But people are getting used to that now. So I do think it will be that access through the internet. I think it will be versionless. I think it will always have the latest version, but it's value. If we put value into our products, frankly, the rest will look after itself to some degree.
Great. Any questions from the audience before we move on to the last of two questions? Andy in the back there?
How many more years? And I want to hear from each four of you.
I hate it.
The way I
change it?
as do I. For the same reasons you do, David. Because the way I look at it, SaaS is a selling model. It's a subscription model, a rental, as Olaf said, for software. We used to buy it on CDs. We could have sold CDs as a SaaS model if we were just sending you a new one each year. But now we have the cloud, which is we used to have our software on CDs. Now our software is in the cloud. So how long are we actually going to be using this fancy term SaaS, or are we eventually going to just say, is this a subscription, or is this a one-time purchase?
I think we should have a competition, and we get very drunk over the next 2 nights, and on the last night, the winner of the new acronym is crowned the king.
I mean, Andy, nobody right now is talking about shareware anymore, right? I mean, shareware was essentially software, right? It was just somebody was trying to make a differentiation on how the distribution model actually works. And I think it's very similar what we're seeing with SaaS. And the question is, does that substitute software, or is software going to substitute SaaS again at a certain stage?
And don't get me started on cloud. That's another one.
Olaf, how would you?
Picking up your question, Andy, I remember, I think almost a decade ago, Microsoft introduced a new technology called ASP, Application Service Providing. So I think that was one of the first names. So the real name was mainframe. So yeah, the days where we had dumb terminals and could connect to a mainframe, and we were all happy about that. And then we disconnected, had a PC, and could do it all on our desks. Now we're going back. Yeah. So it's history repeated. And I think there might pop up someday someone who has not only a cool name, but also a very cool idea. And we will sit all there and say, well, that's it. So, and maybe it has a new name.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Mr. Bacher?
How do you guys see the problem develop that I, as a consumer, not owning the software in the cloud, if a company goes away, goes bankrupt, is bought and closed or whatever, how do you or do you see ways for me as a consumer to mitigate this risk?
Who would like to take that one?
All I can say on that is I think there's lots of things that we will not know how to deal with until they arrive. And who knows what they've got in the cloud? Has anyone got a dashboard on their desktop that says, there's that picture of my mum that I put... It's so unclear to me what I've got where that concerns me. I don't know what data I've got out there. When I've bought products, I'm now unclear of whether the subscription ends tomorrow or whether there's something that ends in 6 months' time. I feel it's a little bit out of control for me. Whereas when I bought it and it was on my desk, I knew it was there. So I think there's an opportunity, even in the utility space. How can we create a dashboard or a much more user-friendly term for people to know what they've got, where they've got it, and how that's protected? And I do think that there's a play there for somebody if they can do it in one very easy user interface where somebody can just see what they've got, like I do with my bank or with anybody else where I've got things that they own on my behalf.
Olaf?
I think you have to watch out simply whom you trust your data and with whom you're doing business. That's it. So if Larry and Sergey say, well, we are done, we don't have, and go to the seller and pull the plug, well, Google's done, and then we are all in the dark. Well, in the Stone Age, actually. But so it depends really, and I think until right now it didn't happen. What we had right now were some hacks that passwords have been stolen, but actually no big provider has going bankrupt. Did go bankrupt. It's different with banks. So if you look now at people who are putting their money into the banks, they really look where to put it. And I think the day will come that one cloud provider just will go bankrupt, and then all the people will say, oh, that's new, that could happen. And then they will just think over and maybe switch to other providers, whatever.
The thing with that is it suggests that you know where your data's going today. You don't. You might be dealing with one company, but if you buy on UniBlue, the purchase goes through Cleverbridge. So there's lots of examples, I think, where as a consumer, you're thinking you're buying from A. They may be very trustworthy in your mind, but your data and your financial information is going through B, C, D, and E, and is being held by E. And how are you ever going to control that? And you only need to click on some of those retargeting ad banners on the internet, and it's quite amazing what people know about you from a couple of clicks. And then they're starting to offer, I don't know if you see it, offer you something that you bought already 3 days ago 50 times. So I think there's a lot of things about nobody knows who they're giving it to. You do with some of the big companies for sure, but not the majority of the time that you're surfing or using the net.
I want to talk a little bit about what's the future, right? What's going to happen here? What are some of the ideas that people have? And I want to throw this picture up showing the latest and greatest from 15 years ago, the Palm Pilot. Kind of got absorbed into the smartphone, and sort of BlackBerry, I think, would really be the next one after it. But at the time, people thought that was really the next great device, right? There was this device, Palm Pilot, it's taking over, everybody has to have one. But we've kind of skipped over it because it got absorbed into the phone. And I want to show a video of something, in case you haven't seen this. About 2 minutes of this is really interesting. You know, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I think that we could all make a reasonable assumption that that's fairly close because of, you know, tablets and phones. It's all the touchscreen technology is there. But what I think you're seeing in there is software kind of everywhere. And the question is, who's going to, you know, sort of get into that market, or who could people in this room be sort of jumping over these ecosystems that we're going to talk about in order to get into that market? You know, what do people see as really the future of software? You know, where will software be, and what are the opportunities? Because those digital ecosystems, which we didn't talk about much, are trying to create this walled garden. So is there an opportunity to sort of jump beyond that? I'd like to start maybe with Olaf for some insight there.
Well, the future, I think, will be bright for software. Yeah, and we have to see. Personally, just to make it very short, well, we all have a kitchen. So, and what we do is nowadays we do go to a supermarket, download some food, yeah, and we go to McDonald's, get some maybe food as a service, and also we have maybe some individual food created and served to us. And thank you in advance for tonight. But I don't think that, for example, getting a microwave sold to you and that only can cook food from a certain provider is not the thing actually that people want to have. So I think that the system, the ecosystems like app stores will someday vanish and be replaced by open systems.
Stefan, what's your opinion of that? You know, future of software?
I don't know how the future of software looks like, but I think the main intention must be make our life easier. And coming back to your question, what is happen when a cloud provider goes down? I think the more interesting question for me today is, how can I reduce the time when I start looking for the right picture I made, maybe with my 3 different devices, which I put on to Facebook on my local device, on my photo book. So I know so many people are talking in our company, oh, what was the last an original file we worked on? And what is the right Excel calculation 10 people worked on and have it on 10 different devices stored? So I think if it comes to the software, the future of software, I think everybody has to look more deep into the benefit, make it the life easier for people.
Mm-hmm. David, you've talked quite a bit about the future of software, saying it's migrating to SaaS and some of the other things. What's your kind of longer range vision on that?
Longer range vision would be people won't talk about software very much. I think that it will be almost in the background. I don't think the consumer will be aware. I think the word software will probably be something different in 15 years. The life cycle of products is getting faster and faster and faster. An app, on average now, does very well in the first 3 months and then is pretty much dead. So the life cycle will be much quicker. And I think technology, you'll wear it. It will be everywhere. I think it will become very integrated into your world. But the software piece probably won't be so obvious to people. I don't think they'll go and add pieces like we used to our PCs. I think it will just be more intuitive, like an app. And I hope you're absolutely right that the ecosystems will get broken down. I make the joke that imagine you only had 3 supermarkets you could shop in. All the products in there were only from one company. They decided what house you lived in. They decided what car you drove. If you bought a Ford, you had to go to a Ford garage for petrol. If you ate food, it was from a food shop called Ford. That's what you're doing today in some of these ecosystems. And I think people will rebel. They'll feel very locked down, and hopefully things will turn around and people will find workarounds. So I think it's huge. I think if you're going to make money and you want to be in an industry that's changing faster than any other, software is it. Where do you place your bets right now? I'd probably take all my money off the table and go away for a year and then come back, because I think you're going to have a clearer idea. But I definitely think technology and humans in the way that we work is going to be more intertwined than anything that you've ever seen. And I think that that video will probably be look very out of date in 10 to 15 years' time. You've only got to look at Star Trek when they had the little flip phones that everyone thought was crazy. But nobody thought there was ever going to be flat screen TVs. If you really look at every piece of idea for the last 100 years, before they arrived on the scene, nobody ever put a flat screen TV anywhere. Very interesting. So I think it's going to be even wilder.
Christian?
I think that software really has to make life easy. So I share totally the opinion that Stefan mentioned and also Olaf did. I think my biggest concern, though, is when I take a look at the hardware industry, and let's just take any phone producer right now, they have not come up with an idea of making things compatible amongst each other. It starts with a recharging cable, which has to be different for every single device. So, I mean, if we can't even come to an agreement there, I don't think that we're going to come to an agreement on kind of a framework where everybody is going to be able to work and establish compatibility. And that's my biggest concern, because already today, and I still consider myself somebody that is kind of tech savvy, although I'm a CEO of the company, I am overwhelmed by the challenges that I am faced with nowadays when utilizing software. I mean, some of the products that you guys produce, I can't use, full stop, without having a full-fledged training to it. And I'm just hoping that that is going to change, but I wonder if it's actually going to happen.
Thank you all for your attention, and have a nice break here.